Hi, this is Kasian, and it's time for our weekly conference call at VectorspaceAI. We'll start with what's happening around the world. Over 40 are dead, resulting from Hurricane Ida, tornadoes, and flooding in the northeast of the U.S. Globally, new virus variants continue to grow and be fought. The New York Times is reporting on supply chains. Their headline reads, "The world is still short of everything. Get used to it." And in quotes, pandemic-related product shortages from this article. From computer chips to construction materials were reported to be resolved by now. Were supposed to be resolved by now. Instead, the world has gained a lesson in the ripple effects of disruption. Moving on to the industry side, Reuters is reporting that Reddit is preparing to file for an IPO. Next, a headline from Quantum magazine reads, "To learn more quickly, brain cells break their DNA." And in quotes, "New work shows that neurons and other brain cells use DNA double-stranded breaks, often associated with cancer, neurodegeneration, and aging, to quickly express genes related to learning and memory." Researchers at Canada's McGill University report protein discovery pulls at the roots of recurring brain cancer. And in quotes, the team started by investigating the way these cells operate, which led them to discover a pair of proteins that regulate the genetic programming behind their behavior. A protein called galectin-1 was found to interact with another called HOXA5, or HOXA5, to guide this process. And when the scientists intervened, they saw surprising results. In preclinical animal models of glioblastoma, the scientists suppressed the galectin-1 protein by deleting the gene that codes for it, and found it brought about significant improvements in the way the tumors responded to radiation therapy, which in turn boosted the animal's lifespan. Adding to this, the team has analyzed databases of glioblastoma patients and found that those with low levels of galectin-1 and HOXA5 proteins had the best prognosis. "What we found was really astonishing for us," says Arizu Jahani Asal, an associate professor of medicine at McGill University. "After we inhibited the galectin-1 protein, the brain tumors simply didn't grow for several months. To improve patient response to therapy, we must exploit these newly identified vulnerabilities in cancer stem cells. The findings further broaden our knowledge around the function of cancer stem cells and how they might be targeted for better patient outcomes. As their next steps, the researchers intend to use CRISPR to investigate and compare approaches that target the galectin-1 and HOXA5 complex in the brain." And New Atlas is reporting that. And of course, that relates to work we are going to be doing with the brain ECM, or the brain extracellular matrix, and any damage that happens from heavy ion particles traveling through space. Next, Mars is safe for humans, but only for 4 years, latest research is reporting in Space Biosciences. And following that, Barron's is reporting, "Buy Virgin Galactic because 250,000 people want to go to space and can afford it." Next, we'll move on to themes and events. And we did just mention that Reddit is preparing for an IPO, according to Reuters. And if you treated the Reddit IPO as a theme, this is actually a pretty effective way to trade an event. And in this case, the event would be an IPO, a popular IPO, the Reddit IPO. Associated to that event are stocks and cryptos that may rise in anticipation of the IPO, or may rise because they've got a deal with Reddit. One of the most successful trades that we've ever executed was based on a sympathy play that held a 17% interest in a company that was going to IPO. And of course, based on sympathetic relationships, that vehicle moved up quite a bit, and that provided a nice return, obviously. So the point is that a theme can be an IPO, and its associated components stocks or cryptos can be any stocks or cryptos that might move in sympathy in anticipation with that IPO. Reporting from our VXV thematic basket channel. We're going to be on a regular basis reporting from our VXV thematic basket channel where themes are reported and baskets are produced. So we'll be including themes and global events that are found by our community and are posted to that channel. If you'd like to participate, feel free to send us a message and with a request to join that channel. That channel also relates to our investment club, which we'll talk about in just a bit. We're still under themes and events, and the next event and theme would be the Countdown, Inspiration 4, Mission to Space. This is a Netflix series that will document a mission to space, a 3-day, overnight, 3 nights in space, 2 nights in space, for a crew of civilians. These are non-astronauts. And of course, there will be all kinds of data collected related to their biology and any effects of microgravity or radiation, in addition to all kinds of other measurements that will be made related to immune systems and chromosomal translocations and things like that. So we'll be part of that, analyzing that data. So that data won't be available for some time. And likely, probably, we would guess, based on our familiarity with the industry, it would probably be available Q1 2022. So early next year. So that would also include any space-related companies that might move in anticipation of this event, this global theme that will be talked about related to this documentary on Netflix. Next, we'll move on to our corp side, and we are engaged in capital raising. This is an ongoing process. We raise in small tranches, but we are engaged in also raising a formal round, a large round of capital, and we are lining up groups to talk about that right now. And we are in dialogue with EPIFund, that's EPIFUND, and Space Capital, and Space Fund. That's one word, Space Fund. We're going to be opening up dialogues with other investors in the space industry and inviting them to the table. Sitting at our table will be financial markets investors, companies as well, such as S&P, Morningstar, and other investment groups. We will also have on the other side of the table EPIFund, Space Capital, Space Fund, and Microsoft Azure Space. Microsoft has multiple investment arms, obviously, within their company, and a few dedicated to space. Next, under Corp, we have an investment club section to talk about here. And just real quick, we want to say that we've got over 400 people that have joined the VXV Thematic Baskets channel. We are converting that channel into the investment club. That would mean that anybody on that channel interested in joining the investment club can do so. We prefer that people join the investment club first by interacting on the VXV Thematic Basket channel so that you can understand how global themes are extracted from news, or how a global event might be targeted, and then how a basket of stocks or cryptos might be generated for that global event and then filtered. The generation of the basket, the thematic basket of stocks or cryptos related to a global event, is just one step toward achieving alpha. The second step would be how you filter that basket. You might have 100 components in that basket. You might want to filter them down to 10. You might have 10 components, and you might want to come up with your own capital allocation algorithm. You might want to create a network of thematic baskets for better capital allocation. So there are all kinds of, you might want to create custom indicators for your filters, or you might want to create custom data sources, and the list goes on. It all boils down to how you design your data set. And of course, that's going to lead to our dataset design competition, which we've mentioned in the past. But high-value datasets are where we all want to go here. And not every dataset we produce will be high value. We produce hundreds of billions of them, and we have the capability to produce hundreds of billions. We will be producing a few million initially for Space Biosciences on Azure Space. However, we have to engage in QA and curation processes, both for the Space Biosciences side and the financial market side with financial market researchers. But high-value data sets would be the goal. A high-value data set can be worth millions of dollars every month. We're still under the corp side here, and HR is next. We have open job recs. Please feel free to look at them. They are located on our site, and these job recs relate to data engineering, computational biology, and bioinformatics. Under data engineering, there would be NLU, NLP, and crawling skills needed. On the legal side, everything is ongoing. And one of the reasons that we've placed a few things on hold on the corp side, and this is largely to communicate both into our internal team and to our external community members and our engineering team. We operate based on maintaining parity with engineering. When you are a science and technology company, the core is your engineering group, your R&D group, your science and engineering group. When it comes to executing on engineering only executes so fast, and everyone else needs to be in parity with that. Nothing moves faster. Nothing can move faster than engineering. And speaking of that, we will move to our engineering product QA and ops section. And there are engineering efforts that need to take place for the venture capitalists and angel investment and investment banking groups that we are talking to, along with hedge funds and asset management companies, as they represent a class of investors or capital for this company. So in our pitches, in the modifications we make to our deck, those require engineering cycles. You might wonder, why are engineering cycles required to make a modification to a deck? Well, it's because we are a science and technology company. In our deck will be links to demos, live demos, and these demos, of course, will be impressive. And that takes engineering, platinum level engineering. We'll be clearing engineering issues so that we can focus on space biosciences. And will be part of those engineering issues that we'll be clearing will be based on summarization modules and demos for Chicago as well. We want to make sure everything is nice and stable, nice and robust when we go to Chicago. And we'll be demoing several things in Chicago from the engineering and product side. So good QA cycles are important for us here. Some of those things relate to the API, the basket generation API, along with the summarization modules and the ability to showcasing the ability to filter baskets along with backtesting. Next, we're still under engineering, product, QA, and ops, so we'll move to our space biosciences section. And in this section, I have a note on our summarization strategy. The summarization strategy relates to summarizing scientific papers, and we'll go ahead and do that. We're cutting our teeth on new summarization techniques we're implementing related to a customer by the name of CSSI. And CSSI is working on extracting extracting structured data from unstructured data, and that just means automatically being able to use a machine to automatically look at a scientific publication or a paper and extract anything from named entities, which would involve NER or named entity recognition, from basic string matching all the way to extrapolating or predicting summaries of content, both abstractive summaries and any other kind of summaries that we can use to refine the process to be able to digest a paper as quickly as possible. Summarization is key because it enables a researcher to speed up their process of discovery. And we are all about accelerating scientific discovery. We are also going to be clearing engineering resources and issues for sequence matching, and this would be taking an RNA or DNA or protein sequence and matching it for similarity against other known sequences. We'll talk more about that in a bit. On the financial market side, Chicago demos are still in process and being stabilized. And under our general issues, general engineering issues, not related specifically to space biosciences or the financial markets, CSSI, as I just mentioned, is under our general section. They are not a financial markets company and they are not a space biosciences outfit. CSSI is a company that, as mentioned, wants to automatically extract information from scientific papers so they can provide advice to groups that produce Netflix shows and other kinds of TV series, other kinds of documentaries, and entertainment content in Hollywood, so that the content is structured in a way that it is not offensive. Next, we've got CERN. We had a meeting with CERN last week, and that meeting involved understanding how we can leverage these 17 leptons. They're dealing with 17 particles, and there are much more than 17 proteins or genes in the human body. So 17 particles is not enough. It doesn't allow us access to enough data to begin to make relationships with other particles. And in fact, we learned that a better objective for us would be to establish attributes around Feynman diagrams so that they can connect Feynman diagrams to experimental work they're doing. And a Feynman diagram can be represented as a vector with the attributes of a Feynman diagram as scored attributes within that vector. And vectors can be compared with one another and other kinds of vectors. So we're going to take a supervised and unsupervised learning approach with CERN. It'll be a combination. We'll be analyzing vectors based on attributes and human-generated labels, and then we'll be analyzing any content in scientific literature, but we will also, from an unsupervised method, we will cluster Feynman diagrams. We'll get more into that later. We'll share more details about that as we progress. And we hope to get to a point of progression where we are able to, together, jointly with CERN, talk about our work there. That's one of our major goals. Next, we'll move on to customers, partners, and collaborators. And within the space biosciences side, we are mainly focused on the investment firms that we are talking with right now. So this week and the next, we are going to carve out some time to, under our customers, partners, and collaborators section, we're going to carve out time to focus on just the capital raising partners that we have, that we're going to be talking to, or that we've already talked to and we plan on talking to. And of course, as mentioned, Epifund, Space Capital, Space Fund, and a few others. Everything in the financial markets under customers, partners, and collaborators is in process, and that includes all the big names we've talked about in the past. We don't have any specific updates this week. We did say it would be a slow week. Next week, we hope to have updates related to one of our larger partners. Under corporate strategy, corporate development, business development, and sales and marketing, everything is in process. And again, there is a Chicago heads down focus on that. We do have efforts happening when it comes to partnerships and collaborations in space biosciences, but not yet on the sales and marketing side. But we do anticipate that will happen pretty quickly as people begin to understand the value of what we're going to be offering in terms of our protein sequence matcher. Next, we'll move on to exchanges, and we are in dialogue with KuCoin. We are going to see how far we get with them in terms of their pricing and how much wash trading is happening there, and of course input from the community. But it's likely to happen at this point. We are also inviting other exchanges, any other exchanges, to come visit us in Chicago. Next, we have questions from the trader base. Question 1. I know a lot of big investment firms use real-time data sets from companies like Visible Alpha to help make decisions. I'm pretty familiar with VXV, but was wondering, how does the team at VXV plan to compete with companies like Visible Alpha to get large clients? Well, we are going to maintain our relationship with New Data. They represent close to 200 funds. We've only talked with 10 so far. We are collecting data points, and with New Data, they have a certain way of interacting with their funds. We also have plenty of other alternative data providers we can partner with, including Visible Alpha. We've got alternativedata.org and a bunch of others. And we are not in competition with Visible Alpha. How does a brain surgeon compete with a heart surgeon? It's completely different expertise. It requires completely different disciplines. We compete on the natural language understanding language model area when it comes to correlation matrix data sets. That's not something anyone at Visible Alpha does. That's so rare, you're not really going to find anyone that's doing that right now. That's why we're doing it. And that's why there's no competition. The competition for us is if we have a group out there that claims they're doing natural language understanding, executing on language models to build correlation matrix data sets. How vectors are constructed, how attributes are constructed for those vectors, and how those scores are calculated for those attributes are key. How those vectors are compared for similarity. Which calculation are you using to compare your vectors for similarity? You'll get wildly different results. Wildly different precision and accuracy at times. So when it comes to competition related to Visible Alpha, this would be Visible Alpha benefiting from a relationship with VectorspaceAI based on the fact that we're providing them with data sets they're not getting from anywhere else. Question 2. Is there a dashboard or information where we can follow the development of the revenue? Is there an overview which customers are contacted or contracted? I think they meant contacted. We'll be following the same filing and reporting guidelines required by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. We've done that in the past, and we will be doing it in the future and currently. So we do anticipate doing that soon, and we encourage everyone to keep an eye on the revenue, the consequential revenue. So that's certainly the right question to ask. And we are going to be fully transparent with everyone in terms of the consequential revenue we'll be generating. It is our prime target, the prime milestone of this company. Question 3, how is our realization of current revenue review comparing with the estimated revenue as mentioned in the presentation deck. Is the estimated revenues as mentioned in the presentation deck already updated, renewed based on current expectations and closed contracts? Well, our goal has always been to start the timeline for consequential revenue that you see here in the deck based on the close on a round of capital. And we have yet to do that. We have been raising the valuation of this company so that we can raise cheap, low maintenance, smart capital that will be at an arm's length for us. And that first takes a dual focus, of course, on building the pipelines for revenue generation and building the company to a point where it is set to scale into receiving custom requests and customizations without going down that slippery slope of providing too many professional services, which is what we do not intend to do. Our intention is to operate with a SaaS or /DaaS-like model, data as a service model, subscription model, where we are able to charge 99 cents per update per data set. We have customers we are talking to now that are prepared to onboard to our paid tiered level of service, to a custom paid tiered level of service, but not quite yet. We know that the floodgates are going to open for us when Morningstar, S&P Global, and a few others showcase our data sets. We are preparing for that right now by building the pipelines, making things robust, making sure we can scale into this properly. We are also going to focus on a retail offering, and that's going to enable us to generate revenue that will be combined with our institutional or enterprise revenue. The focus, of course, is enterprise revenue. That will be our bread and butter. We've learned in the past that companies do survive any downturn with a focus on enterprise revenue, with enterprise revenue coming in. So that's going to remain our focus. We will provide updates as soon as we can. Question 4. Something I don't understand about the Vectorspace business model. If the AI is so good, why sell access to the AI system at all? Why not just use it and beat the market and make all the money? So this is a common question. It's been asked throughout the years to us. If you have a system, why don't you use it yourself? And this is the right question to ask. The reason we can't use a system like this is based on the fact that we tried to use the system in the past with friends and family money. We had a small amount of capital, small meaning under $1 million. We tested the system. We suffered losses for 6 days straight and weren't able to bounce back. That's the short of it. We had to raise capital again. And you do not want to be put in that position. So our next step, of course, was to find an investment group out there that would give us $50 million. No one's going to give you $50 million coming from Space Biosciences onto Wall Street, essentially. Even though we had been working in the financial markets on the side, so to speak, consulting and advising hedge funds, and having ran a public company as well, we are not investment professionals. And that would mean that we would have to have the infrastructure of a hedge fund to take this capital in. That would require investment and so on. So here we are today, understanding that one of the best ways to execute on a trading system would be to imitate best of breed. Today, who is best of breed when it comes to trading systems? You might want to consider Renaissance Technologies. This is one of the world's most successful hedge funds. What it's done is been able to beat the market and bring money in for its customers, its clients, but also, and its outside investors, but also its internal employees and team members, based on the Medallion Fund, where they keep the cream of the crop of the alpha, and they make money for their own internal team members that way. That's what we're going to be doing here with the investment club. We're going to keep the cream of the crop in terms of the alpha, And cream of the crop, meaning proprietary filters, proprietary data sources, proprietary data set designs that we choose to keep for our internal investment club. We will be licensing, we'll be providing subscriptions to, and we will be providing other services related to data set generation and basket generation, thematic basket generation for global events on a generic vanilla level to outside institutions. Outside institutions will also have their own customizations. As a platform like this that produces data sets that result in thematic baskets associated to a global event, thematic baskets of stocks and cryptos, that's just the very first stage in extracting alpha. Other stages include, how do you construct your data sources? Which data sources do you choose? Do you choose proprietary data sources or a combination of both proprietary and public? Which context controls do you choose? How often do you get your updates? How do you filter your baskets? Do you create networks of baskets? How do you use our technology to take a look at a press release and extract keywords based on a context you choose? So the platform, the data set, and the basket generation system are completely customizable. And it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you can do to extract alpha. And that's just within the financial markets. So we certainly do intend to raise a round of capital to run the investment club, and that capital will be used to execute on cream of the crop trades. Question 5. I've been wondering about personal data. So companies have been selling our data for years now, Facebook, Amazon, etc. Nowadays we have as many examples of companies that give back the control of that data to the user with the personal choice of making the data available for profit or not. With this in mind, what is your position on user data? Would Vectorspace tap in to this either by buying data, partnering with companies that collect user data for profit, etc., or offer it to clients as baskets, or not at all? Curious as to see what your opinion is. Well, the closest we got to using user data was with a company called Intertrust. Intertrust purchased the assets of a former company of ours. We were asked after they purchased the assets to take a look at, as I remember, 150 million Facebook accounts that had been downloaded at the time, had been hacked basically, and then released as open source. They wanted to form relationship networks between people, places, and things by analyzing the graph data within this data set or this corpus of 150 million face. You can look that up. This was an early hack. But then there have been other hacks, and we decided not to wade into those waters at all. We don't wade into the waters of personal data for all kinds of reasons. We don't use user data. We don't use personal data, and that would include medical records or anything like that. The closest we will get would be personalized medicine associated to your personal genome. And that is quite a bit different than operating on medical records or personal data. We'll explain that later, but personalized medicine does require some bit of personalized data, but that's as close as we're going to get would be your genes. And that's pretty close, but operating on gene sequences can be a way to protect identity. There are ways of protecting identity. Question 6, is VectorspaceAI trying to make or could make help someone make a COVID vaccine? Let me restate that. Is VectorspaceAI trying to make / could make / help someone make a COVID vaccine? The answer is yes. We operate in biosciences, and that would mean specifically in the area of drug repurposing. If you go to drugbank.ca or FDA.gov or even Wikipedia, you will find profiles of drug descriptions. There are about 8,000 drugs out there, and a lot of them, more than we expect, can be repurposed. And if you look up drug repurposing or drug repositioning and COVID, you'll see that that is the next stage we're at here in terms of fighting a pandemic, is understanding which drug compounds can be repurposed for certain viruses. And that would mean that you'd have to understand that virus sequence. And it may even require you to find a similar virus sequence. But it certainly requires you to correlate a drug compound to a virus sequence, or a group of drug compounds to a virus sequence, or correlate a group of virus sequences to a single drug compound. And from there you can engage in relationship network generation and visualization, which is something we do, which is the core of what we'll be doing. And of course, relationship networks between drug compounds and viruses in a particular context. And that's key. So it could be in a variant, in the context of the Delta variant, for example. So we will talk more about that later, drug repurposing, because that has a direct connection to space biosciences. Drug repurposing in space biosciences might affect how fast your DNA gets repaired after being hit with a heavy ion particle. Drug repurposing, any advancements in drug repurposing in space biosciences would translate directly to advancements in COVID-19 and attacking or engaging in drug repurposing or drug repositioning to fight the current viruses, variants, and future variants and future viruses, which would mean future pandemics. Question 7, what's your take on the way other crypto companies make money? How is Vectorspace different from them? Well, like space, enterprise revenue in crypto is hard. And that would mean consequential monthly recurring revenue is hard. Monthly MMR, that's what we're after. And that's not what most cryptocurrency companies are after. Most crypto companies follow, unfortunately, that old .com model. And this is common for markets to forget. But you've got a lot of new startups, a lot of new projects in crypto that have zero focus on revenue. And this is why when we offer thematic baskets of crypto related to global events, we'll be filtering them based on the ones that have a revenue focus and the ones that don't. And then there are the ones that are clearly scams. That's pretty easy. One way to identify a scam is to determine if their revenue model is based on the appreciation, their price appreciation of their token. If it is, that's not a revenue model. We've heard some companies out there mention that they will generate revenue by getting their token to appreciate or selling their token. Amazon does not generate revenue by selling Amazon stock. That misconception is prevalent in crypto, we've noticed. So at least we would recommend to at least put crypto into two buckets. Those that are generating or have a focus on generating revenue, have actual revenue projections, and have a revenue plan, a path to revenue, a solid path to revenue, where you can clearly see, if you were a venture capitalist or an angel investor or a crypto investor or any institutional investor into that company, you should be able to clearly see a path to revenue. They should have the math right there for you. And most don't. Today, most crypto companies don't. One of the reasons for that is most crypto teams may not have run a company before. And one thing that you begin to understand, especially if you've run a public company, is ROIC, return on invested capital. We'd encourage everyone to look that acronym up, ROIC, R-O-I-C. This is something that most crypto founders should focus on. And return on invested capital can also be achieved via adding assets to your company, or growing assets, or acquiring assets. And that would include a net asset value calculation, or a NAV calculation. If you're not familiar with NAV calcs, we've talked about those in the past. That is certainly how you return value to stakeholders. That is one powerful way to do that. We'll be talking more about that in the future. A NAV calc, by the way, would be, for example, a company holding 17% in an IPO. If you own 70% of the Reddit IPO, that 17% would be written in your books as an asset. And a net asset value calculation would be applied. And your trading vehicle would be worth all the more for it. And that is a net positive for return for your stakeholder. Question 8. What future applications for VectorspaceAI's datasets are possible / are you thinking about? Well, we'll cover that in our strategy section. And before we get to our strategy section, that's the end of our questions from the TraderBase section. We have a new section here that we'll just have intermittently throughout the year. We'll be engaging in contests, and our current contest was to find anyone who could name the background picture, a picture hanging in one of our old offices. On that picture was a geological map of the central far side of the moon, and we had a winner. The first person to properly name the background picture would win 1,000 VXV. That winner is Arshid Ashraf for correctly naming the background pic. Also announced on our channel. Next, we'll move on to our strategy section. And as a reminder, we are a science and technology startup. What that means is everything operates in parity with engineering. I wanted to reiterate that. Our summarization strategy. We wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Summarization might seem boring to most people. Search used to be boring to most people. Summarization is becoming more and more necessary. One of the reasons for that is the exponential increase in data sets, and resulting content. Nobody has any time to read 5 pages of any articles these days. It's a hard thing to do. A scientist barely has time to read papers. So being able to condense that time, being able to speed up the process of research or reading, comprehension, hypothesis generation and discovery can happen with summarization. If you can summarize a scientific paper, that might save a scientist an extraordinary amount of time, especially if you can summarize it in the context of something, which today you won't find with summarizers. Our summarizer does context-controlled summarization. So you can summarize a document in the context of chocolate chip cookies, or in the context of trees, or in the context of cars, or in the context of money or geography. So the summarizer that we have is pretty powerful. We'll be offering it to academic collaborators as they've requested it as well. So we're going to rally around that a bit and put a bow on it so that we can move on to a few more interesting things, even more interesting than summarization. And that would be validating relationships between proteins that are already found in the literature or that have already been experimentally validated. Validating those relationships based on what we generate with our data sets. In other words, if we generate a relationship between 2 proteins, just like the proteins mentioned above. The 2 proteins mentioned related to glioblastoma, which is a brain cancer. The discovery of the relationship between those 2 proteins was made based on researchers reading science papers. Automating that process would also include automating discoveries relating to proteins, the relationship between two proteins. One way you can make those discoveries is to engage in similarity matching between protein sequences or RNA or DNA sequences. And that leads us to question 8. Question 8 we wanted to answer here in the strategy section because it connected to a few other things we are talking about, or we've talked about in the past and are working on. And the question for question 8 was, what future applications for VectorspaceAI's datasets are possible / are you thinking about? And one of those applications, aside from summarization and other things we've talked about, would be the similarity matching between protein sequences, creating a relationship network where a researcher is able to view a protein they are very familiar with and then right next to it see a protein they are not familiar with, but then make that leap to be able to say that there is a relationship here they should investigate and then perhaps make a discovery, just like the discoveries made between the two proteins described earlier. So for question 8, what other kinds of things can we do with our data sets? Well, when it comes to unsupervised learning and clustering and creating relationships between anything in the world and anything else in the world, it's almost infinite in terms of what we can accomplish with data sets. Data sets power all of AI and ML. We will be specifically using them to advance space biosciences, which in turn will advance all biosciences, in particularly advancing how we protect and repair human DNA. And we're going to be doing that by analyzing different animal species. For example, how tardigrades' DNA repair mechanisms work, or jellyfish, moles, elephants. RNA, DNA, and protein sequence similarity matching is also the basis for the discovery, I should say the advancement made by DeepMind. This is Google's AI branch. DeepMind's AlphaFold 2. They used a language model that would be based on multiple sequence alignment, and that is finding similar sequences between RNA, DNA, and other protein sequences. So looking at matching protein sequences for similarity is one thing that our data sets can accomplish. A protein sequence, a DNA sequence, that's a form of language. If you look up language and DNA, or the language of DNA, you'll find out more about that. When you match protein sequences with our data sets based on just the sequences alone, you get a big bang for the buck. But you get an even bigger bang for the buck if you combine the sequence matching ability based on training of the sequences with analyzing the scientific literature bodies based on natural language understanding of human text or human-generated language. So we're going to combine those models so that at the end you've got a protein-to-protein relationship network, so that a scientist is able to easily look at one protein and find similar proteins, or sequences of RNA and DNA. On the ISS is, according to our talks with Microsoft Azure Space, there is the HP Spaceborne 2 computer. It's producing synthetic DNA sequences, and they need to be matched against known human sequences. DNA sequence matching is a large part of bioinformatics, computational biology. So we'll be engaged in DNA, RNA, and protein sequence matching. One of the reasons for that is we have what we believe to be one of the best out there, probably better than any other sequence matcher out there. And in that, we would be in a position to match new RNA or DNA sequences or protein sequences, sequences of viruses that are found in ice. And ice is being drilled right now. There are several lakes in the Arctic. There's one lake, I believe they drilled about 3,000 feet deep. I don't have the references in front of me now, But you can look this up. They have found new viruses that have never been seen before. And to be able to take this virus, this sequence of RNA or DNA and protein, and match it to known human sequences is going to lead to discoveries. So that's where we are with our data sets. And of course, ice, it's not only found on Earth. And we'll leave it at that. This is the end of our call this week. Feel free to join us next week. If you have any questions or comments, you can find us online. Thanks.